with a lot of problems as well. Tom Petersick is a prison rights activist and an economist. He says having the government be the federal prison's only buyer breeds trouble.
The key problem with federal prison industries and prison industries in general today is that we have granted those industries a monopoly. And that monopoly has exclusive access to the labor force, the incarcerated labor force, and it has exclusive access to government markets for the sale of inmate-produced products. In addition to that, it is exempt from labor law, it is exempt from taxation, and it is subsidized by the U.S. taxpayer.
The Justice System Improvement Act also gave states a boost. Again, Heather Thompson.
So, for example, in New Jersey, their Department of Corrections got a new marketing slogan, which was, "And you thought we only made license plates," because, in fact, they started to make a whole lot of other things. And they were making everything from desks to school furniture to, you just can't imagine that. In fact, you can go on any state website and see the amount of products.
Etta is in the women's prison in Jessup, Maryland. She's the clerk of a sew shop where she started off as a seamstress. Etta has been in jail for over 30 years.
I like getting up early in the morning, and I like the different variety of people that I have to work with. There are all kinds of people here with all kinds of talents and all kinds of problems. So not only am I a clerk, I also help them socially get back into whatever it is that they need to get back into. I'm more of a big sister to a lot of the people here.
She talks about the inventory.
Trousers and pants, the jackets, state highway attire, those neon vests that you see on the highway, we make those. We make dietary uniforms. We make hospital gowns for different state facilities, things of that nature.
As the products began to grow, so did the problems. Prison rights activist Tom Petersick says since prisons usually don't have competition with buyers and outside workforces, it can set the stage for the exploitation of the prisoners.
Any economics textbook that talks about monopoly will accent the relative power of the bargaining components, the buyer and the seller, and so forth. So if they're both relatively powerful, then you'll see that the person over whom the monopoly is exercised will have some power against the monopolist, and things might look more or less like competition. But where there are huge power differences, and where there is particularly social opprobrium and isolation, you will see huge abuses of the group over which the monopoly is exercised. And prisoners fall exactly into that category. They're hidden from view, they're disliked by the community in general, and the monopoly is free to behave. There's no one else for the inmate to turn to.
Nowhere to turn also means no unions. In the 1977 case, Jones versus North Carolina Prisoners Labor Union, the U.S. Supreme Court removed court protection from prison labor organizing. Thompson explains.
They had held neither the First Amendment rights that other workers would have, nor the Equal Protection Clause that unions enjoyed. And so as a result, there are no unions in prison, and this is tremendously significant because it means that workers, for example, if there's toxic fumes in the place they're working, they have no basis upon which to challenge that. If they're getting terrible wages, they have no basis upon which to challenge that.
They also don't have the basis for other things. Take, for instance, sick time. At her data entry job, Gina knows no work means no money.
Well, if somebody's sick, usually we relay messages, amongst ourselves to the supervisor. If we have someone that lives in our housing unit and it doesn't feel well, she'll, say, can you please let Nancy know that I don't feel well today, so I'm not coming in. She won't get her base rate. She won't get her keystrokes.
And for some prisoners, not going to work is not an option either. In some states, it's mandatory that prisoners work, and forced labor is just that, forced. If you don't work, there are consequences. Vince was serving a life sentence for robbery. After 10 years, he got his sentence overturned. While in a penitentiary, he worked at a sawmill. Life for those who refused to work was a hard one.
Well, the hole is just how it sounds. It's a place you don't want to be in. It's a place where your privileges are taken away from you. You have a loss of privileges. Your TV, your radio, your little hot plate. And in my case, they wouldn't put anybody in my cell. And, I thought that made it even worse for me because a lot of times people have somebody to talk to or play dominoes or cards in the cell or whatever. But the hole basically is a place where, people are angry and frustrated about their conditions, and they flood the toilets and they set fires and throw toilet paper out on the tier. They scream and shake the boss so much that you feel like you're about to have a nervous breakdown because nobody will be quiet. They squirting urine and feces on the guard when he goes by. People will do anything for attention or whatever when their mind is idled. And it's just like somebody saying, shut up all that noise. I found that in the end, that silence can drive you just as crazy. And people need each other. And so a person would rather have a bad relationship with you with some sort of foul communication as opposed to no communication or human contact whatsoever.
If being in the hole is not enough, the pay or lack of it may just do it. Gina says she has one of the best jobs in her prison doing data entry.
A good batch right here is this is about an average batch. And I probably got about $2.92 for that batch.
And it took you about an hour to do that batch? About 2 hours.
2 hours.
Okay,
yeah.
okay. And so that would be about, is it $8 a day?
Usually it's about a good day would probably be $10 a day.
Even some in jail know they're not getting paid what they're worth. Etta from the sew shop.
They can't get better quality for a cheaper price than they do right here. Because what we make here is no comparison to what you would have to pay for on the outside. We make $3 a day, where in the free world you may have to pay somebody $12 an hour to sew a particular garment. So I think that, we fare much better, and the quality of work that we put out is absolutely great.
Prison rights activist Tom Petersick says in federal prisons, there's never enough money to go around except for the employees.
One of the things that's interesting is that every year, because the employees, the civilian employees of Federal Bureau of Prisons are federal employees, they get a roughly 3% increase in their hourly wage rate every year. Well, that increase in their wage rate alone is greater than the total wage that is paid to the incarcerated worker in that same system, because the incarcerated worker isn't protected. And this has gone on for decades, but the Bureau of Prisons never has enough money to pay an increase in wage to the incarcerated worker, while the civilian worker gets this raise routinely every year without complaint.
There's always been low pay, and there's always been holes. But the biggest shift prison labor has seen over the last couple of decades is who is hiring the prisoners. Private companies who are looking for cheap labor. Again, Heather Thompson.
What they call a cost competitive and motivated workforce, and they get a great deal. So we have all kinds of companies that now use or have used prison labor, and we could name some of them. Some of them: Kmart, Honda, McDonald's, Hawaiian Tropic Products, Burger King, Victoria's Secret, Allstate Insurance, Nike. There's just all kinds of them, and sometimes they're using services, like for example, a phone bank system. They're using prisoners to make the phones, and sometimes they're actually using the physical labor of prisoners.
Some of this work is done in private prisons. In a private prison, the prisoner is sentenced by the state, but is jailed by a private company. Thompson says labor done in these types of prisons can be even more troubling.
Who's going to be in charge of the medical needs of the prisoner? Who's going to be in charge of safety conditions? Who's going to be in charge of work hours? Who's going to be in charge of any of this? And the answer is there's very little regulation. So private prisons haven't even it's even more problematic, because then we don't even have any state regulation whatsoever to really count on.
Safety and regulation, or the lack of it, has always been an issue for those working in jail. Vince was in a federal prison for over 10 years.
This guy, his name was Vanderbilt, or his name was Vanderbilt. They started calling him Vanderhoof because his hand was cut off by one of those big machines, and they scooped his hand up and put it in some ice and took it back and They actually sewed his hand back on, and a couple of his fingers he could move, but they saved some of his hand and put his hand back on. So people started calling him Vanderhoof. So I remember that the guy's whole right hand was just whopped off by one of those big saws from him not paying attention. Those saws are so big, just the sound of the saws on can unsettle your spirit after you've been around them for a little while. Even if you've been there working in the factory for a couple of years, it's like something you don't get used to, hearing